money to create good privacy technology. So the question is really, how much money does it cost, and is there a way to find it now? Because 20 years ago, my conclusion was there isn't a business case, there isn't a government interest that's going to invest $1 billion in privacy in the internet.
I think you're largely right that there is not a business case for privacy, that people do want it. All surveys say it, but when it comes time to paying the extra dollar, no one pays it. There are a lot of reasons why when privacy is not salient, that it's not an immediate need, it's a long-term, and you're choosing an immediate gratification versus potential long-term harm. We're just very bad at making those trade-offs. Privacy clearly is something that will have to be legislated, that it is not something the market will be able to provide. Well, it's like, the same thing with dolphin-safe tuna and child labor laws, right? Everyone wanted those things, no one wanted to pay for it. So it really took governments to step in and say, look, you can't employ children in the mines. You're just not allowed. I don't care if it's cheaper. We're just not going to let you do it. And privacy is going to be that sort of thing too. There's a collective action problem. And to get the social good, you are going to need the collective action solution, which is government. It's a very non-US answer, but I think it is what's going to happen eventually, because it can't not.
And I think that follows very much along the lines of what you commented earlier, that we need some international alignment here. And you're doing lots of work in the European Union, and I'm sure that you have great collaboration with the American counterparts and so forth, because that's how you work. So that there is a lot of work coordinated, but do you see legislation being discussed as with the goal of harmonizing or aligning this internationally? And I'm sure that you, as a policeman, and I'm sure Jakob, as a usability expert and photographer, you will probably also have an idea of what is happening internationally, as well as the rest of the panel, of course. But how is this alignment going? Now we have concluded, I think that there's a need. I've also in my own presentation called for that. How do we see that we can go about aligning internationally? Because I think that national borders are appearing to be more and more imminent than they were just a few years ago.
I don't know. But I think in the EU some things are happening with the data protection regulation, which is being put forth, but still a long way to go. But I mean, that might be a step in that direction. But I think there's a lot of political issues. I mean, even within the EU, different governments do not agree on what privacy is and what's worth. So getting that beyond regions such as Europe sounds like a hard nut.
I know it's being discussed or addressed in the EU, and at the moment they are addressing the issue of common or equal penalties for the same kind of crime in the member states. But they have, as you said, difficulties in reaching. And it is being discussed, but there's a lot of views on it. So, but it's being addressed. So we hope for the best.
Perhaps it's asking for a round square. I actually get a gut feeling that it's impossible, that we have to just face the reality that we will not get this alignment. And then it's just a different world from what we imagined 5 to 10 years ago that the internet would bring us. But I don't know if that's true. I see a need, and apparently you see a need, and I'm sure that you all see a need for this kind of thing to happen. But to get there, it seems like a very high mountain to climb.
I think numerous researchers have launched privacy-friendly alternatives to Facebook, but I mean, no users really moved over there, right? It's like having a Danish Facebook. If nobody else is there, then what's the point?
Yeah. There's a question here. Yeah.
Lars Simonsen, I'm actually a chairman of the Danish Business Association in IT, and we are advising Danish industry and businesses about what to do on these issues, including the state surveillance. And we say two things. One is cryptify your stuff, and we say, well, probably do that in defaults in your stuff, and we do concentrate on businesses, and for that, because we think that they are really at stake. They have the knowledge. The normal people in the street, they don't know what to do, but businesses, they do have employed people, security people, and then they can do something about it. So the other advice we say is use open source, and that is because we know that there are backdoors in closed source and in open source, but we know in the long run we have a chance of removing the backdoors in the open source. And I would like to ask the panel, what is your take on this, on open source? Do you see that as a way forward, or what do you think about the closed source? Can we still employ that? Yes, that's the question.
Yes, I can start. I mean, certainly open source is part of the solution. It is not a panacea. Open source doesn't magically mean good. It doesn't magically mean secure. But yes, we have a greater chance. It's harder to hide a backdoor in open source than it is in closed source, assuming the open source is being looked at, something like Linux. Lots of open source products that nobody ever analyzes can be just as insecure. But yeah, I do believe that is something we need more of. And it's not just open source software, it's open source hardware, which is a whole new level of open source we haven't really looked at yet. Open source cell phones, open source PCs, routers. That the more that is closed, the easier it is for the NSA or someone else to go in and make a secret agreement with the company to put in a backdoor. But open source doesn't make it. Doesn't mean you can't have a backdoor, just makes the avenues of putting it in harder and the potential discovery greater. And there are some examples of some really good bugs we've discovered, which are almost certainly enemy action in Linux. We don't know who, right? We don't know which of a dozen countries it could have been, 100 countries. But we do catch them occasionally. And some of them, seem obviously to be mistakes, and some of them obviously be deliberate, and some of them, a lot of them we just don't know which it is.
And I guess that you guys, you have a different point of view here. You just discussed that closed source could be a part of the solution, that if you do not reveal what is happening, that could be a security model.
No, actually not, because what we do in my company can be open source. I'm happy to tell people how it works. The thing is that you choose randomly among a variety of crypto systems, and that can be open source. But the randomness is not open source. The randomness is random. So the security lies in the randomness, not in the closed source.
Good to understand. Well, yes?
It's also an economic discussion, right? Because even though it's closed source or it's owned by somebody, it doesn't mean that third parties cannot look at it and validate that it does what it's supposed to do. But then, for open source, you kind of have this common business model where everybody has a motivation to work with it. And I think, if somebody were to pay the same people to look at Microsoft's implementation of some crypto protocols, they could also validate in principle that they were doing the correct thing. So I think that it's not as much as open source or closed source or whatever. I think it's as much about who is going to pay for the hours, or people, it's a grassroots movement where people are doing it because they think it's interesting, or how is it set up. So I think it's a very complicated discussion in reality. I think it's only as closed source as such.
Which makes me think of something else which is perhaps along the same lines, monocultures. We tend to have mass media and we tend to have hardware. There's a question down here. Please. Phone that's working.
Hi, my name is Mette. I work with IT security at Secure. And I'm a part of a few councils helping and advising companies and citizens in Denmark. There are a lot of councils all around Denmark aiming at better information about IT security. But actually, only the people listening are the ones that already know that it's important, and it's really, really tough to get all the other ones that are not attending today or not reading the newspapers about these issues. How do we actually get them to understand how important this issue is? Should it go through companies that would have some kind of education performed towards their employees? Should it go through schools? How should we conduct this so that it will be a natural part of our education and ongoing with the internet and the use of it?
Tough questions.
That was a tough question.
I guess that there's a new IT security education on the way. Perhaps that could be a starting point.
Well, I would say teach your kids about it, and then let it come that way, and send them to DTU.
I have to learn how to break crypto and then...
Valuable life skills, that too.
I can give you an example with children where I have a son and a daughter that they were 10 and 6 when they started taking pictures with the iPad and posting it onto one of the photo services, I cannot remember which one. And they were claiming that they could always just take them down, these photos. And I showed them that I could make local copies and, distribute them, send them via email to their grandmother and write, stupid things about them, attaching the photos and so on. And that was just a single example. And it scared the hell out of them. And it's not that they're not using the iPad anymore, but they have considered now who should they send these photos to. So it's very tangible, a photo, and it's very easy in a sense, but you have to somehow describe what the outcome might be, and that's very hard with email because we use it so much all the time. And I think your point is right. Even with the revelations that we have had over the last year, it's really hard to get all the precautions going and get the change. So, well, I think education is what you start now with DTU, and also this occasion is.
I think we're too old, right? Because you read that young people, they look at privacy differently, right? It's like, my wife does not know my Facebook password, but supposedly if you're 19 years old and you don't share your password, then it's a sign of mistrust. Right, so this, I don't think that, in terms of teaching young people how to behave securely, this is not necessarily what they want. They don't have the same perception of privacy that we do. They're used to technology in another way.
I think you need to take it up in schools, as you said, start with the younger generation. In many cases, it's my experience that the parents doesn't know what the children are doing. So having the parents educate the children in security, in the IT field, I don't think it's a way to go. Of course, you can address it towards the parents, but I think you need to address it in schools instead. We can see children down to the age of 12 buying tools on the internet to commit crime. And when you have children at that age buying tools to commit crime, I guess the parents doesn't know what's going on, and I think you have to address it even before they ever turn 12. It has to be included in the education that they are receiving in school. They receive an iPad, for example. Start with the iPad. How do you set it up? What do you be careful with the social media, if you wish to do so? But at least take it into the normal education school, like so many other things.
There's a question down there. I think we'll take this gentleman first. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Okay. My name is Peter, and I have a question about certificates. And I set up a communication server recently, audio video, and I bought semantic certificates. And what impact does that have on privacy? Since it's an American subsidiary or an American company.
I don't think we're going to troubleshoot your problems on stage.
No, I was more inquisitive about the privacy function of those certificates.
You pick who you trust, and you trust who you pick.
Okay.
Yep, we have another question down here.
Morten Silmer. I understand that encryption might be one possibility for preventing surveillance and protecting privacy. And maybe 20 years ago at the start of the internet there were a few platforms and few different applications, so it would be possible to do encryption. But these days there are many different platforms and operating systems and a lot of different proprietary protocols for the different applications running. Do I have any comments on how encryption can be possible for the end user to apply? Also considering, for example, metadata for phone calls and other information that's actually out of the hand of the end user. Thanks.
It's a bit. I mean, I don't understand the question. If I don't see why that's a problem that we have different platforms. I mean,
yeah, the issue I consider is that if I want to apply encryption, I got both let's say a smartphone, a tablet computer, a home computer, and different appliances in my home that also runs with data over the internet. And I don't actually have the possibility to apply encryption on all those different applications. So it's kind of difficult for me actually to use encryption myself for protecting privacy.
Yep. I mean, fundamentally, if you're a user, you got to buy something, and if you're someone who's selling something, you can make something that works if you want. I mean, Facebook works on all those platforms. Why can't encryption work on all those platforms? Well, you said bits are bits. So if someone, well, I mean, it sounds like a market opportunity for somebody. Hopefully, it won't be a U.S. company that does it.
We have a question down here. And we have one more over here. We start with you, please.
Hi, I'm Martin from Sequoia. And this morning, Schneier started out by outlining basically a dystopia government eavesdropping. And just a few speakers later, David outlines what looks to me like basically the perfect government eavesdropping platform. So I was thinking maybe David and Bruce, you can comment on the insistency of the Danish state to sort of enforce platforms that put the government in very central roles, like WAYF or like MIT.
Okay, I'm not sure that you were here when I did my presentation.
I had to run out and do something else, so I was out and came back, so I can't comment on it.
No,
probably for the best.
I operate a hub and spoke infrastructure, and it's true that the data that passes through there can be read. And it's true that you have to trust me and my team and the operations of that. And that's a fairly easy thing to do and operate in a Danish context. It's also true that the next generation that we want to do is not based on cryptography, should not be able to read what is passing through. And it's also true that the US government is building such a beast for the federal government and federal services, the F6 infrastructure, to provide services to citizens. And it's also true that the governments really know everything about you already. They can get to the databases in the public sector. So, in a sense, I think you should qualify this government notion with what part of government is doing this, because you have civil branches of government that have access already to much of this data. And then you have some more dark sides that appear through the documents from Snowden that show that this is also being for other purposes than the originally intended one. And then I forgot what your original question was.
But David, I mean, technology is coming up that allows you to make such single federation points without them being able to track you if you disregard all the metadata and whatnot from a pure authentication point. So I think in the future you'll see solutions where you can have this type of federation point, but still not giving them access to all the aggregate data.
And that was definitely good news from the cryptographer. So I think we're running out of time. We may have time for a last question. There's one down here. Please.
Yeah, it's working. Okay. So my question is basically about the efficacy of the mass surveillance. We haven't talked a lot about that today, but because, for instance, in this room, most of us agree that we need more privacy and this mass surveillance is not good. But for instance, I talked to my girlfriend about it, and she was like, that we need it to work, we need it to protect against terrorism and some of the other threats, and so I'm not sure that the general public feels that the balance is off as we feel in this room. And one of the problems is that we're not aware of the efficacy. Like, has it helped? Has it prevented a lot of terrorist attacks? We don't know that because they're not telling us. So, yeah.
In the U.S., the answer seems to be very clearly no. General Alexander, in the beginning, said it had been 53 attacks, and he dropped down to 16, then it was like 8, and then it was this one guy sending money back to Yemen. That's the one thing it caught. It is, I think, the biggest piece of propaganda out of the NSA that mass surveillance does protect against terrorism. There's absolutely no evidence that it does. When you think of the Boston bombings, those two guys, one of them had a really sloppy Facebook trail, and that should have been a gimme if mass surveillance works against terrorism. The case has never been made. It's only made in the media, right? You watch movies, you watch television, and a person of interest, and it's made. So it's made in fiction, and it's made in it's obvious that, and because it sounds good, people believe it. But the evidence is not there. The analysis we've seen done outside of government says it doesn't. We have not seen the benefits. I mean, if there's any point the NSA would try to convince you with data that it does prevent terrorism, this is it. And if you remember, every time we would catch some 2-bit non-terrorist who liked to use the name, we would parade them all over the media to make sure people stayed scared and keep funding the police state. That's not happening here. So, given all of that, the evidence is that no, this does not keep us safer. But of course, that's actually a very hard argument to make. Not just your girlfriend, my mother is perfectly happy with all of this. She's a good U.S. liberal. She believes this is keeping terrorists from killing her children, that would be me, and is all in favor of it. So yes, these are very hard arguments to make, because they in the face of fear, logical arguments simply don't work.
And with those words, I would like to thank you in the panel. I would like to thank Lars Ramkilde, Mr. Bruce Schneier, Johnny Lund, and Jakob Pagter. Thank you very much. Let's give them a hand.